Please don't let me die out here. The journey of a brave Apache woman. Ayoka was born in a small Apache village nestled between the red cliffs and wide plains of the southwest. From the moment she could walk, she ran barefoot across the dusty paths of her home, laughing as the wind whipped her dark hair across her face. The village was quiet but alive with a rhythm of daily life. Children played with wooden toys and sticks, elders tended to gardens, and the smell of cooking fires drifted across the narrow dirt lanes. Ahyoko watched everything with wide eyes, absorbing each lesson nature and her family offered. Her father was a strong and wise man, known for his skill in hunting and tracking. He would often take Ahioka with him to the hills to learn the ways of the land. "Look at the footprints, Ahioka," he would say, pointing to faint marks in the soil. "These tell stories. Every step an animal takes, every movement of the earth, it speaks to those who listen." Ahioka listened carefully, crouching low to inspect each print. She learned to identify deer, rabbits, and even the cautious foxes that moved silently under the moonlight. Her father's patience and guidance filled her with pride. Her mother, soft-spoken yet strong, taught Ahioka about the plants, their uses, and the wisdom passed down from generations. She showed her how to gather herbs without harming the earth, and how to make simple remedies for common illnesses. "The land gives," her mother said, "but only if you respect it." Ahioka learned to kneel beside the small streams, studying the ripples, listening to the birds, and feeling the heartbeat of the earth beneath her hands. The village was her first classroom, and nature her teacher. Ahioka was not like the other girls in the village. While many were content to stay close to their homes, she felt a constant pull toward the unknown. She would often climb the tallest hills, looking at the vast desert beyond, imagining the lives that unfolded out there. She wondered what it felt like to walk for days through land untouched by her people, to meet strangers, to see mountains and rivers she had only heard about in stories. The elders would warn her, their voices heavy with concern. "The world outside is not always kind," they would say. "You must be careful, Ahioka. The lands are wild and the people are not always friendly." But she could not contain the curiosity that burned inside her. Even at home she tested her courage in small ways. She would venture alone into the woods at dawn, carrying a small satchel with food and water. Pretending she was on a great adventure, she learned to move quietly, to watch the skies for signs of storms, and to recognize the tracks of different animals. Each excursion made her heart beat faster, with excitement and fear, and each time she returned safely, her confidence grew. She began to feel that the world, with all its dangers, was a place she could understand if she stayed alert and trusted her instincts. Her bond with the land went beyond learning survival skills. She felt the stories of her ancestors in the wind and the rocks. At night, by the fire, her grandfather would tell her tales of brave Apache women and men who had walked paths much harder than hers. He spoke of battles, long journeys, and moments of quiet courage. Ahioka would sit cross-legged, eyes wide, imagining herself walking beside those ancestors, feeling the strength they had carried through the ages. She dreamed that one day she too could prove her courage, not for pride, but because it was the right thing to do when faced with challenges. Schooling in the village was simple, but Ahioka absorbed every word she could. She loved stories about faraway lands, maps showing mountains, rivers, and forests beyond the desert, and lessons in numbers and letters. But the classroom was never enough for her. She needed the hands-on knowledge that only the wild could give. She learned to read the clouds, knowing when rain would come. She learned the language of animals, recognizing their calls and movements. She discovered how to purify water from streams and how to make simple traps to catch small animals. Every skill added to her sense of independence, and yet she never lost the humility her parents had taught her. Respect for life, for the land, and for the people around her. Her friends often played games that seemed small and ordinary, but Ahioka always turned them into adventures. She imagined she was crossing deserts, climbing mountains, or exploring hidden caves. While the other children laughed and ran, she paid attention to the ground, the wind, and the shadows, learning lessons without realizing it. Sometimes they teased her for being so serious, but she only smiled, knowing that these small exercises were preparing her for the real challenges she would face one day. Life in the village was not without hardships. Water was scarce at times, and food could be hard to find in the dry months. Ahayoko watched her parents work tirelessly to provide for their family, respecting the balance between taking what the land offered and ensuring it could renew itself. She learned patience, the value of effort, and the importance of community. Her heart ached sometimes seeing others struggle, and it made her even more determined to be strong, not just for herself, but for those who depended on her courage. Ahioka also began to notice the way her people looked at her. She was small, but there was a fire in her eyes and a determination in her movements that set her apart. When she helped her elders with tasks that required stamina and focus, they nodded with quiet approval. When she guided younger children safely through the hills, they smiled with respect. These small moments of recognition planted seeds in her mind. Maybe one day she could do something truly brave, something that would matter beyond her village. She learned the importance of listening not just to her teachers or parents, but to the land and the world around her. Each day the wind brought whispers, some of storms, some of animals, and sometimes, as she imagined, messages from her ancestors. She would close her eyes, breathe deeply, and try to understand what was being said. She learned to move silently through brush, to step carefully over rocks, and to notice the tiniest details. Because in the wilderness, even the smallest thing could make a difference between safety and danger. By the time Ahioka reached her early teens, she had already begun to understand that courage was more than facing physical challenges. It was about curiosity, about being willing to step into the unknown with respect and preparation. It was about caring for others, using knowledge wisely, and trusting herself, even when fear pressed close. The elders saw this spark in her and often told stories by the fire, hinting at the journeys she might one day take, journeys that would test her in ways the village could not imagine. Ahioka knew that her heart would always belong to her village, to the land that had raised her, and to her people who had taught her the meaning of patience, respect, and bravery. But she also knew she could not ignore the call of the wider world. She would watch the horizon for hours, imagining paths through deserts and mountains, rivers and forests, feeling both excitement and a quiet fear that something might go wrong. Yet the fear never stopped her. It made her cautious, alert, and more determined to prepare herself for whatever lay ahead. Evenings in the village were quiet, and Ahioka often sat alone under the wide, star-filled sky. She traced constellations with her finger, listening to the gentle whispers of the wind. Imagining stories behind each star, she thought about the Apache women who had come before her, about the journeys they had taken, and the strength they had shown. She imagined herself walking beside them, feeling their courage flow into her, giving her confidence to face the unknown. The first part of Ahioka's life was a time of learning, of building skills, of understanding the delicate balance between fear and courage. It was a time when the small sparks of her spirit were nurtured by family, community, and the land itself. She was growing into a young woman ready to face challenges, to explore, and to test herself beyond the boundaries of her village. She would carry these lessons with her always, whispering them in moments of doubt, and drawing strength from them in ways she could not yet imagine. Ahioka's story had only just begun. The world outside was waiting, full of dangers, wonders, and tests that would demand all of her courage. But for now, she was learning, dreaming, and preparing. Every step she took across the hills, every herb she gathered, every story she heard by the fire, was shaping her into someone extraordinary. And though she could not yet see the full path ahead, she knew deep in her heart that one day she would face it with bravery, resilience, and the wisdom of all those who had walked before her. Ahioka felt the first stirrings of adventure one early morning when the village awoke to the news of sickness in a nearby settlement. Rumors had spread quickly. Children were falling ill, elders struggling to care for them, and supplies running short. The village council debated who could safely travel to help, and Ahioka listened quietly from the edge of the circle, her heart pounding. She was not the eldest, not the strongest, but something inside her whispered that she could make a difference. Her parents noticed her intensity. "It is dangerous, Ahioka," her father said, his voice gentle but firm. "The journey is long, and the lands between here and there are not always safe. You must think carefully." Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "We worry for you. Courage is important, but wisdom must guide it." Ahioka nodded, taking their words seriously, but the pull in her chest was stronger than any fear. She could not sit idle while people suffered nearby. Before sunrise the next day, she packed a small satchel with essentials. Her father gave her a water pouch, a knife, and a bundle of dried meat. Her mother added medicinal herbs and wrapped them carefully in cloth. "Remember what we taught you," her mother said, her eyes soft but serious. "The land speaks to those who listen. Pay attention, move carefully, and trust your knowledge." Ahioka hugged her parents tightly, feeling both the weight of their concern and the warmth of their faith in her. She left the village quietly, stepping onto the rocky path that led away from her home. The cliffs glowed pink in the morning sun, and the wind carried the scent of dry earth and sage. Each step was measured and careful. She reminded herself to watch the tracks on the ground, to notice the clouds above, and to listen to the whispers of the wind. The world beyond her village was bigger, wilder, and unknown. But she felt ready. She repeated the words softly, almost like a prayer. "Please don't let me die out here." The first day of travel was challenging but manageable. She walked along narrow paths between red cliffs and sandy plains, climbing over rocks and balancing along ridges. She drank from small streams, always purifying the water with sand and stones as her mother had taught her. She saw signs of animals, rabbit tracks, bird calls, and the occasional fox slipping silently through the brush. Every detail mattered. Every choice could make the difference between safety and danger. That night, Ahioka set up a small camp under a large rock overhang. She built a tiny fire, careful to keep it controlled, and prepared a simple meal. As she ate, she thought about the village, about her parents' faces, and about the people in the sick settlement. She felt the first sting of loneliness. Even though she had been alone before in short excursions, this was different. This was far from home, with no familiar voices around. But she reminded herself of her training, her ancestors, and the skills she had learned. She was not afraid to feel fear. She was learning to carry it with her. The second day brought more difficulties. The sun rose high, turning the plains into a blistering expanse of heat. Ahioka covered her head with cloth and moved slowly, conserving energy. Water was scarce, and she had to ration what little she had. She noticed dark clouds in the distance and decided to move carefully toward a small hill that could provide shelter. By mid-afternoon, the wind picked up, dust swirling around her. She crouched low, using her body to shield her face, and remembered the stories of her grandfather. "The land tests those who walk it," he had said. "Patience and observation are your greatest tools." She repeated these words in her mind, steadying herself. Along the way, she encountered natural obstacles that tested her resolve. A fallen tree blocked a narrow path, forcing her to climb over slippery branches. A small canyon appeared unexpectedly, its walls steep and loose with gravel. She considered turning back, but the thought of the children who were sick drove her forward. Every step required careful judgment, and every moment sharpened her instincts. By evening, she had grown tired but felt a quiet pride. She had faced challenges and overcome them using only her skill and courage. Ahioka's nights were never easy. She slept lightly, listening to the sounds of the desert, the distant call of an owl, the rustling of small animals, and the whisper of the wind. Her dreams were filled with memories of her village and the lessons she had learned. She imagined herself walking alongside the brave Apache women of the past, their strength and wisdom flowing into her. Each morning she woke refreshed but aware that the journey ahead would demand even more. On the third day, the journey became more dangerous. A sudden storm approached, dark clouds rolling over the cliffs like an angry tide. Rain fell in heavy sheets, turning the dry earth into slippery mud. Ahioka found a narrow cave and took shelter, wrapping herself in her cloth and huddling close to the walls. The storm raged for hours, the wind howling like a living thing. She thought of her parents and whispered, "Please don't let me die out here." The words were not just a plea but a promise to herself, to survive, to carry her courage forward, and to help those who needed her. When the storm passed, the land had changed. Streams swelled with water, and paths she had walked before were now rivers of mud and rock. She carefully tested each step, balancing on wet stones and avoiding deep puddles. The experience taught her patience and reinforced her respect for the power of nature. She began to notice small blessings: a bird landing nearby, a tiny plant she could use for medicine, the sun breaking through clouds, reminders that life persisted even in hardship. By the fourth day, Ahioka felt the physical strain of travel. Her legs ached, her hands were sore from climbing rocks, and her water supply was dangerously low. But she had also begun to grow emotionally stronger. She recognized her fears and named them, then pushed forward despite them. She found joy in small victories, discovering edible plants, spotting fresh animal tracks, or finding a safe place to rest. Each accomplishment reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep moving despite it. As she neared the sixth settlement on the fifth day, Ahioka encountered the first signs of other people. Smoke rose in the distance, and she heard faint voices carried on the wind. Her heart raced, a mixture of relief and caution. She approached slowly, keeping low and observing before revealing herself. The people she found were weary but grateful. They had been struggling with the illness, unsure if help would arrive. Ahioka offered her knowledge and supplies, helping them prepare simple remedies, fetch water, and organize care for the sick. In the following hours, she realized that her journey had transformed her. She had begun as a young woman full of curiosity and determination, but now she carried a quiet confidence shaped by real challenges. She understood the value of preparation, patience, and respect for both nature and people. Her thoughts often returned to her village, and she sent silent gratitude to her parents for teaching her the skills that had carried her safely. As the sun set over the settlement, Ahioka looked at the horizon. The world was vast and full of unknowns, but she no longer feared it. She had faced storms, hunger, and uncertainty, and each trial had strengthened her. She whispered once more to the wind, "Please, don't let me die out here." And this time, it was not just a plea. It was a declaration of her survival, her courage, and her commitment to helping others. Her stay at the settlement lasted only a short time, enough to provide care and guidance. The people praised her bravery, though she remained humble, knowing that her skills were the true tools that had guided her. When it was time to return home, she packed her satchel carefully, refreshed with the knowledge that the world was not only a place of danger, but also a place where courage and care could make a real difference. The journey back to her village was still challenging, but Ahioka carried herself with newfound confidence. Each step reminded her of lessons learned on the outward journey: to observe, to respect, to prepare, and above all, to trust herself. By the time she arrived at the familiar cliffs of her home, the village welcomed her with awe and relief. She had walked into the unknown and returned safely, stronger and wiser than when she had left. Ahioka knew that her adventure was only the beginning. The wider world held many more trials, joys, and lessons. But she also knew that she had grown in ways that could not be measured by distance alone. Her courage, her respect for life, and her determination to face challenges head-on had become her true companions. The journey had taught her that fear could be managed, danger could be respected, and the unknown could be faced with skill, patience, and a brave heart. That night, as she sat beneath the stars with her parents beside her, Ahioka realized that the whispers of the wind and the lessons of her ancestors were more than stories. They were guides for every step of her life. She smiled, thinking of the paths yet to walk and the challenges yet to face, confident that she could meet them all. And as she drifted into sleep, she carried the quiet knowledge that bravery was not born from the absence of fear, but from the courage to move forward despite it. After leaving the settlement, Ahioka began the journey back to her village, but the path she had taken before now felt different. The land that had once seemed familiar now appeared harsher, more unpredictable. The wind carried a chill that made her shiver, and the shadows of cliffs seemed darker, more foreboding. Each step reminded her that the journey was far from over. She clutched her satchel tightly, checking her supplies, and whispered to herself, "Please, don't let me die out here. It was a mantra that had carried her this far, and she needed it more than ever. The first trial came unexpectedly. A sudden flash of movement in the distance caught her eye, a herd of wild deer running across the plain. She paused, watching them with awe, but the ground beneath her feet shifted. Loose stones tumbled down the slope, sending a small avalanche of dust and gravel in her direction. Ayoka managed to steady herself, gripping a rock with one hand and balancing carefully. Her heart raced as she realized how easily a small mistake could lead to serious danger. The thrill of adventure was intertwined with the sharp sting of fear, and she began to understand that bravery was not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. As she continued, the sun rose higher, and the heat became oppressive. Her water pouch was already half empty, and the streams she had relied on before were now dry or too muddy to drink safely. Ayoka paused under a sparse tree, wiping sweat from her forehead, and considered her options. She could push forward, hoping to find a reliable water source, or she could wait for the day to cool. She chose to move slowly, resting in the shade whenever possible, conserving her energy, and carefully observing the land for any signs of life. The isolation of the wilderness began to press heavily on her. For the first time, she truly felt the weight of being alone. The voices of her parents, her village, and the children she had helped at the settlement were distant memories now. Only the wind and the occasional call of a bird accompanied her. She missed the warmth of her village, the comforting presence of familiar faces, and the safety of known paths. Yet, with every step, she reminded herself of the lessons she had learned. She was capable, she was prepared, and she would survive. By the third day, the journey had become more treacherous. A dark storm cloud appeared on the horizon, moving faster than she expected. Ayoka knew she had to find shelter quickly. She spotted a small ravine and ran toward it, careful not to slip on the loose rocks. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, turning the earth into slippery mud. She huddled under a ledge, wrapping herself in her cloth and keeping her supplies close. The storm roared around her, lightning flashing and thunder shaking the cliffs. She pressed her face to her knees, whispering again, "Please, don't let me die out here," hoping that her prayers would carry her safely through the night. The storm lasted hours, leaving the land transformed. Streams had swollen, small paths were now rivers of mud, and fallen branches blocked the way. Ayoka had to navigate carefully, testing each step and moving slowly to avoid injury. Her muscles ached, her hands were raw from gripping rocks, and her feet were sore and blistered. Yet she did not complain. She reminded herself that each trial was a chance to grow stronger, to learn more about the land, and to prove her own courage. On the fourth day, a different kind of challenge appeared. While crossing a narrow ridge, she spotted a shadow moving quickly along the rocks. At first, she thought it was another traveler, but then she realized it was a mountain lion, its eyes fixed on her. Ayoka froze, remembering the lessons her father had taught her about respecting animals and moving calmly in dangerous situations. She slowly stepped back, avoiding sudden movements, and whispered softly to herself, hoping the animal would not see her as a threat. After tense moments that felt like hours, the mountain lion disappeared into the rocks, leaving Ayoka shaken but unharmed. The encounter reminded her that the wilderness demanded both respect and vigilance. She built a tiny fire, careful to keep it low and controlled, and prepared a simple meal from the dried meat she carried. She reflected on the trials she had faced so far, the storm, the mudslides, the mountain lion, and realized how much she had learned about herself. Each challenge had tested her courage, her patience, and her skill. She understood that survival was not just about physical strength, but also about mental focus, careful observation, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. The fifth day brought another test of endurance. Ayoka woke to the sound of a rushing stream nearby. It seemed like a blessing, but as she approached, she realized the current was strong and the banks were slippery. She had to cross to continue her journey, but one wrong step could sweep her away. Carefully, she examined the stones and logs that could serve as stepping points. She moved slowly, testing each one with her foot before committing her weight. The water was cold and fast, but she made it across safely, her heart pounding with relief and pride. Even as she overcame each obstacle, the loneliness and fear remained constant companions. Ahioka had no one to share her triumphs with, no one to encourage her when doubt crept in. Yet she discovered something remarkable within herself. She realized that her own thoughts, her own courage, and the lessons of her ancestors were enough to guide her. She had learned to rely on herself, to trust her instincts, and to find strength even when no one else was near. By the sixth day, she noticed signs of human life again, footprints in the mud, remnants of fires, and distant voices carried on the wind. The thought of encountering other people brought both relief and caution. She approached slowly, moving quietly, observing before revealing herself. When she finally met a small group of travelers, they welcomed her with surprise and curiosity. Ahioka shared what she had learned about the trails, the weather, and the land ahead. In return, they offered her water and food, simple kindnesses that she had almost forgotten could exist in the wild. During this time, Ahioka also reflected on the emotional toll of the journey, the fear of the unknown, the pain of exhaustion, and the weight of being responsible for herself had been heavy burdens. She realized that courage was not a single act but a continuous choice, choosing to keep going when every part of her wanted to stop. She thought of the children she had helped at the settlement, the stories of her ancestors, and the teachings of her parents. Each memory fueled her determination to survive, to learn, and to continue her journey. As the seventh day approached, Ahioka reached the edge of a vast plain that stretched far into the distance. The sight was both beautiful and intimidating. She knew the journey was almost over, but the final stretch would demand every skill she had learned. She adjusted her satchel, checked her water, and studied the patterns of the land. She noticed the tracks of animals, the movement of clouds, and the shape of distant hills. Every detail mattered. Every choice could affect her safety. Throughout this part of her journey, Ahioka discovered the depth of her own resilience. She understood that true bravery was not about the absence of fear or the absence of danger. It was about facing both with focus, intelligence, and a steady heart. She learned to appreciate the small victories, the safe crossing of a stream, finding shelter during a storm, or avoiding danger from a predator. Each success built her confidence, reinforcing the belief that she could face even greater challenges ahead. By the eighth day, she finally caught sight of the familiar red cliffs near her village. Relief washed over her, but she did not rush. She moved carefully, knowing that the land could still surprise her. When she finally stepped onto the familiar paths, she felt a deep connection to her home and a new understanding of her own strength. The journey had tested her in ways she could never have imagined, shaping her into someone wiser, braver, and more aware of the world around her. That night, under the stars that had guided her for days, Ahioka thought about the lessons she had learned. The wilderness had been both beautiful and cruel, challenging her body, mind, and spirit. She realized that survival required patience, careful observation, respect for nature, and a strong heart. But most of all, she learned to trust herself, to know that she had the courage to face whatever lay ahead, no matter how unknown or dangerous. Ahioka's journey back from the settlement had not been easy. She had faced storms, predators, scarcity, and fear. But each trial had strengthened her resolve. She had learned the value of preparation, the importance of careful observation, and the power of inner courage. The wilderness had tested her limits and revealed her true character. She had survived not by chance, but by skill, wisdom, and determination. As she lay down to sleep near her village, Ahioka whispered softly to the night sky, "I have not died out here. I have learned, I have grown, and I am ready for what comes next." The stars seemed to shimmer in response, as if acknowledging her courage. She closed her eyes, tired but triumphant, knowing that the journey had changed her forever. She was no longer just a young woman from a small village. She was a survivor, a learner, and a brave soul ready to face any path the world might present. After the long, exhausting journey back from the settlement, Ahioka finally found a small sheltered canyon that would serve as a temporary refuge. The sun was high in the sky, casting harsh shadows over the rocks, but the canyon offered shade and a quiet place to rest. She sank onto a flat stone, feeling her legs tremble from fatigue. Every muscle in her body ached, her hands were scraped from climbing, and her feet were sore from walking long distances without proper rest. She took a deep breath, letting the silence of the canyon wash over her. Here she could finally pause, recover, and gather her strength for the next part of her journey. The first hours in the canyon were spent simply observing. Ahioka studied the small plants growing in cracks of the rocks, the movement of birds overhead, and the insects crawling along the sandy floor. Everything seemed so fragile, yet so persistent. She noticed a tiny spring trickling from a crack in the rock and moved closer to drink. The water was cool and clear, a gift from the land. As she drank, she felt a renewed sense of hope. This small blessing reminded her that the wilderness, while dangerous, could also provide for those who were careful, patient, and respectful. She took time to eat a simple meal from the dried meat and herbs she carried. The food did not taste like a feast, but it gave her energy. As she chewed slowly, she thought back on the events of the past days, the storm that had forced her to take shelter, the slippery slope she had crossed, the mountain lion that had silently watched her from the rocks. Each challenge had tested her, but she had overcome them. Each trial had taught her a lesson about patience, caution, and courage. She realized that her journey was as much about learning to endure and understand herself as it was about traveling through the land. Ahioka spent the next day exploring the canyon carefully. She found small plants that could be used for medicine, observed animal tracks, and located flat areas suitable for sleeping. She built a small, controlled fire to warm herself during the cooler hours and to cook another simple meal. Sitting by the fire, she reflected on her journey so far. She thought about the children she had helped at the settlement and the gratitude in the eyes of the villagers there. She realized that her courage had not only kept her alive, but had also allowed her to bring help to those in need. This thought filled her with quiet pride. During her time in the canyon, Ahioka also focused on her mental strength. She knew that the journey ahead would require her to rely not only on her body but also on her mind and spirit. She practiced breathing slowly, calming her thoughts, and centering herself. She repeated the lessons of her parents and ancestors in her mind, remembering the words of wisdom they had shared. She thought of the stories told by her grandfather about brave Apache women who had faced impossible challenges. She imagined walking alongside them, learning from their courage and resilience. These reflections reminded her that strength came not just from action, but from inner resolve. Ahioka also used this time to plan her route. She studied the shapes of distant hills and ridges, the patterns of clouds, and the flow of water in nearby streams. She remembered the tracks of animals she had followed before and considered how the land might change in the coming days. She made mental maps noting safe paths and possible dangers. She realized that preparation and careful observation were just as important as bravery. By thinking ahead and using her knowledge wisely, she could navigate challenges more effectively and protect herself from unnecessary risk. As the days passed in the canyon, Ahioka grew stronger. Her body slowly recovered from the physical toll of her journey, and her mind sharpened with observation and reflection. She practiced moving silently through the underbrush, stepping carefully over loose stones, and balancing along narrow ledges. Each skill, though small, reminded her that she was capable of handling the challenges that lay ahead. She no longer felt the raw fear she had experienced during the storm or the crossing of the swollen stream. Instead, she felt alert, confident, and in tune with the land around her. Ahioka also noticed the small wonders of the canyon. She watched a family of rabbits hopping cautiously along the edges of the rocks, listened to the melodic calls of birds, and observed the shifting patterns of sunlight and shadow across the canyon walls. Each observation reminded her that life continued even in harsh conditions. The beauty of the wilderness, she realized, was inseparable from its danger. Respecting the land meant acknowledging both its generosity and its challenges. This understanding deepened her connection to the natural world and strengthened her resolve to move forward with care and awareness. During quiet moments, she reflected on her personal growth. She realized that courage was not about rushing into danger or proving herself to others. It was about persistence, resilience, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. It was about staying calm in the face of fear, making thoughtful decisions, and trusting one's own skills. She felt proud of how far she had come, from a young girl curious about the unknown to a woman capable of surviving in the wild and helping others along the way. Ahioka also thought about her family and village. She knew they worried for her, and the thought of returning to them gave her comfort. Yet she also understood that her journey was not just about returning home. It was about learning, growing, and becoming stronger. The challenges she faced in the canyon and in the journey beyond it were shaping her into someone wiser and more capable. She began to see that every obstacle was an opportunity to learn, every difficulty a chance to discover new strengths. One morning, Ahioka woke early to find a mist covering the canyon floor. The air was cool and damp, and the sunlight filtered softly through the haze. She stepped carefully through the mist, noticing small animal tracks and the delicate leaves of plants glistening with moisture. She realized that the land had its own rhythm, and those who observed it closely could move safely and efficiently. Her connection to the wilderness had deepened, and she felt a sense of harmony with the world around her. She was not just surviving, she was understanding, learning, and becoming part of the land in a respectful way. Ahioka also spent time thinking about the future. She knew that the journey back to her village would bring new challenges. She considered how to navigate safely, how to conserve her energy, and how to use her knowledge to overcome obstacles. She thought about the lessons of the past, the storm, the mountain lion, the swollen streams, and integrated them into her plan. She understood that preparation, observation, and patience would be her most important tools. Courage alone was not enough. She needed wisdom, foresight, and a calm mind. As the days in the canyon passed, Ahioka's confidence grew. She realized that fear was a natural part of life, but it did not have to control her. She had learned to face fear with careful thought, to respect the dangers around her, and to trust in her own abilities. Her courage was no longer a fleeting spark. It was a steady flame, fueled by experience, knowledge, and inner strength. She felt ready to continue her journey, to face whatever lay ahead, and to return home with a deeper understanding of herself and the world. Finally, after several days of rest, observation, and reflection, Ahioka prepared to leave the canyon. She packed her supplies carefully, ensuring she had enough food and water for the journey ahead. She moved deliberately, testing each step and keeping her senses alert. She felt a mixture of excitement and calm determination. The wilderness had challenged her, but it had also taught her invaluable lessons. She was no longer the same girl who had set out from her village days before. She was stronger, wiser, and more capable. As she stepped out of the canyon and looked at the path ahead, Ahioka felt a deep sense of gratitude. The land had provided shelter, water, and lessons. Her ancestors' teachings had guided her, and her own courage had carried her through. She whispered softly to herself, "I am ready. I will continue. I will survive." With that quiet determination, she began walking again, moving steadily toward her village, each step measured, careful, and full of the strength she had discovered within herself. Ahioka's time in the canyon had transformed her. She had recovered physically, strengthened mentally, and grown spiritually. She had learned that true courage was not about rushing forward blindly, but about moving with awareness, respect, and determination. She understood that the world was full of challenges, but also full of beauty, life, and opportunities for growth. Her journey was far from over, but she now carried with her a steady confidence that would guide her through the trials yet to come. As she walked toward the horizon, the sunlight illuminating the distant cliffs of her village, Ahioka felt a quiet joy as she had survived the wilderness, learned from it, and grown stronger in every way. Her heart was full of hope, her mind sharp with knowledge, and her spirit steady with courage. She knew that whatever obstacles awaited her on the final leg of her journey, she was ready. The lessons of the canyon, the trials of the past days, and the wisdom of her ancestors were all with her now, guiding her safely home. The sun was just beginning to rise when Ahioka finally caught sight of the familiar red cliffs near her village. After days of travel through rough terrain, storms, and moments of fear, The sight filled her heart with a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. She adjusted her satchel and stepped carefully down the last slope, her eyes scanning the path for safety. Every step felt heavier with anticipation, yet lighter with hope. She knew she had survived, learned, and grown stronger, but now she longed for the comfort of home and the smiles of her family. As she approached the village, she noticed the first signs of life: smoke rising from cooking fires, children running along the paths, and elders sitting outside their homes. The village seemed unchanged in appearance, yet everything looked different to Ahioka. The cliffs, the paths, the familiar faces, they now carried a new meaning. She had seen the harshness and beauty of the wider world, and returning home made her realize the value of the village, its safety, and the lessons she had learned there. She felt gratitude for the guidance of her parents and elders, and pride in the courage that had carried her safely through challenges. When the first villagers noticed her, they froze in surprise, staring at the dusty, tired, but confident young woman who had returned. Her parents rushed toward her, their faces filled with worry that quickly shifted to relief. Her mother embraced her tightly, whispering prayers of gratitude and concern. Her father held her hands firmly, eyes shining with pride. "You have grown stronger than we imagined," he said softly. "We are grateful that you have returned safely." Ahioka smiled, feeling warmth and comfort that only home could provide, yet also a quiet confidence in the person she had become. As she settled back into village life, Ahioka shared her experiences with the elders and children. She described the journey to the settlement, the challenges she had faced, the storm, the swollen streams, the mountain lion, the heat, and the exhaustion, and how she had overcome them. She spoke about the small lessons she had learned from observing the land, listening to the wind and trusting her instincts. The villagers listened in awe, inspired by her bravery, resilience, and wisdom. Her story became more than a personal tale. It became a lesson in courage and perseverance for everyone who heard it. Ahioka also shared the knowledge she had gained about survival and care. She demonstrated how to find safe water, identify edible plants, and prepare simple remedies from herbs. She showed children how to move carefully through the wilderness, watch for signs of animals, and respect the land while learning from it. Her lessons were practical, but they carried a deeper meaning. Courage is not just for oneself. It is for helping others, for using knowledge wisely, and for respecting the world around you. The villagers began to see her not only as a brave young woman, but as a teacher and guide whose experiences could help strengthen the entire community. Over the following weeks, Ahioka's presence brought a renewed sense of confidence and hope to the village. Her journey had proven that the wilderness, though dangerous, could be navigated safely with preparation, patience, and courage. Her bravery inspired other young people, showing them that fear could be managed, challenges could be overcome, and the unknown could be faced with careful observation and a steady heart. The stories of her journey became part of the village lore, passed down around evening fires, told and retold as examples of wisdom, skill, and perseverance. Ahioka herself reflected on the journey with a deep sense of humility. She knew that luck had played a part, as had the teachings of her parents and ancestors. She remembered the storm, the mountain lion, and the swollen streams, recognizing that each moment could have ended differently. But she also realized that her preparation, awareness, and courage had made the difference. She had faced the unknown and emerged stronger. This reflection gave her a quiet confidence and understanding that true bravery was more than physical strength. It was resilience, careful thinking, and inner calm. Her family noticed a change in her as well. The girl who had left the village with curiosity and determination had returned as someone wiser and more self-assured. She moved with purpose, spoke with clarity, and carried herself with calm confidence. Her parents were proud, not just of her survival, but of her growth as a young woman who had learned the balance between courage and caution, action and reflection, independence and connection to her community. They saw in her a spirit that could inspire others and continue the teachings of their ancestors. Ahioka also began to mentor younger children, sharing both practical skills and lessons about bravery. She taught them how to respect the land, how to prepare for challenges, and how to remain calm under pressure. but she also emphasized the importance of compassion, humility, and helping others in need. Her own journey had been both a test and a teacher, and she wanted others to benefit from her experiences. Children would gather around her wide-eyed, listening to her stories of storms, wildlife, and distant settlements. She encouraged them to explore, to observe, and to respect the natural world, always reminding them that courage was not the absence of fear but the ability to keep moving forward despite it. The story of Ahioka's journey spread beyond her village. Travelers who passed through spoke of the brave young woman who had ventured into the wilderness, helped the sick, and returned safely. Elders from nearby villages praised her courage and wisdom. Her actions reminded everyone that one person's determination could make a difference, that careful preparation and respect for nature could overcome challenges, and that bravery was a quality to be admired and nurtured. Ahioka had become more than a survivor. She had become a symbol of hope and resilience. Even as she settled back into everyday life, Ahioka knew that the world beyond the village still held many challenges and lessons. But she no longer feared the unknown. She had faced storms, predators, isolation, and uncertainty, and each had strengthened her body, mind, and spirit. She understood that the path ahead might be difficult, but she also knew that she was capable of navigating it with patience, observation, and courage. The journey had taught her that fear could be transformed into wisdom, challenges into lessons, and solitude into self-reliance. In quiet moments, Ahioka would sit under the wide, star-filled sky, just as she had on the journey, and reflect on her growth. She thought of her ancestors and the brave women who had walked paths before her. She realized that she had joined their lineage of courage and strength, adding her own story to the legacy. The stars seemed to shimmer more brightly, reminding her that she was part of a world larger than herself, connected to both the land and the generations that had come before. She felt a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that her journey had been meaningful and transformative. Ahioka's story also brought the village closer together. Families shared their own experiences and lessons, children listened eagerly, and the elders took pride in seeing the values they had taught being lived so fully. Courage, respect for nature, patience, and compassion became more than lessons. They became part of the village's way of life. Ahioka had not only survived but had strengthened her community, leaving an impact that would endure for years to come. As months passed, Ahioka continued to grow and learn. She helped with the daily tasks in the village, guided younger children on safe paths through the hills, and shared her knowledge of herbs and remedies. But she also carried the quiet memory of her journey. The moments of fear, the storms, the animals, and the silent nights under the stars. These memories reminded her of her inner strength and the resilience that had carried her safely through the wilderness. Each day she applied these lessons, becoming not only a capable young woman, but a true leader and example for her community. Finally, one evening, as the sun set behind the red cliffs, Ahioka stood at the edge of the village, looking toward the horizon. She thought of the settlement she had helped, the challenges she had faced, and the growth she had achieved. She realized that her journey was not just about survival, but about understanding herself, her abilities, and her connection to the world. She felt gratitude for her family, her ancestors, and the land that had both challenged and protected her. She felt pride in her courage and determination, but also humility for the lessons still ahead. Ahioka's story became a tale of inspiration, shared for generations. She was remembered not only for her bravery, but for the wisdom, compassion, and resilience she had shown. Her journey demonstrated that courage is not measured by the absence of danger, but by the choices we make to face it, the preparation we take, and the care we show for ourselves and others. She became a living example of what it means to be brave, thoughtful, and connected to the world and her community. Her life continued in the village, but the journey had left a permanent mark on her spirit. She knew that challenges would come again, that the unknown would always exist, and that danger could appear unexpectedly. But she also knew that she was ready. She carried the lessons of the wilderness, the wisdom of her ancestors, and the strength of her own courage wherever she went. The girl who had whispered, "Please don't let me die out here," had grown into a woman who understood the true meaning of bravery, resilience, and hope. Ahioka's journey had ended in a safe return, but its impact was ongoing. She became a guide, a teacher and a symbol of courage for her village and beyond. Her story reminded everyone that the world is vast and sometimes dangerous, but with preparation, patience, and determination, even the most difficult paths can be navigated. And above all, she showed that courage comes from within, shaped by experience, reflection, and a deep connection to the land and community we call home.